Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Tesla Today. I absolutely love it when we have some fantastic news to share about Tesla. There's quite a bit we're going to go through today. The most interesting one that I like is that there's a really nice comparison between Tesla's batteries versus BYD's batteries. We're going to walk you through that video. There's some new news about GM and Ford, both very interesting about what might happen to them in the near future. And also, there's more information about Tesla executives talking directly now with India government for a gigafactory. So as always, what we do on Mondays, we have Jeff Lutz with us. And Jeff is ex-supply chain C-level executive, previously worked at Motorola, Google, and Lenovo. Currently, he's running his own consulting firm, serving mega cap tech in supply chain design and manufacturing. And formerly, he was also a chief quality officer. Thank you, Jeff. Welcome.
Great to be with you, Herbert.
Okay, let's get through it. And I'm actually very happy that you're here because a lot of this news, your background fits perfectly with that. So let's start with this. Okay, this is a fun bit of news right off the bat. Is people are actually institutionals are buying Tesla. Okay, if anybody's concerned and worried about Tesla stock, it is happening. There's new 13F filings that show that Vanguard, which is already the top investor in Tesla, bought 2 million more Tesla shares. They're continuing to buy more Tesla shares every month. They now own 8% of Tesla. And so this Tesla bull says, Warren Buffett, you better buy Tesla. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I think a lot of firms are accumulating ahead of, the kind of this first half, second half story with Tesla. You have these new models coming out, obviously CyberTruck, very iconic. And again, Tesla did a lot of the tough work in terms of pricing and margins in the first half. And there's a belief that they're really on an upwards trajectory. Coupled that with what's going on with the competition and some of the news we're going to talk about later in the broadcast. And you'll see like there's an inability for some of the competition to actually take a significant bite out of the company. And then Tesla on their own is driving their own organic growth in their existing models and their new models.
Yeah, I actually bought more Tesla shares this morning. Jeff, I didn't share that with you. I'm sharing it with you now. So, okay, and I know you continue to just buy whenever as well too. All right, so I'm very very excited about this particular bit of news. So this is a comparison between BYD's batteries and Tesla Model 3s, and everybody keeps saying that BYD is the next big competitor to Tesla, and they're very right. The Chinese auto manufacturers are making a big move. They're doing very well, and not only in China, but they're now heading into Europe and other markets. But it's important to compare the companies. So I'm going to share this video. It's about a minute and a half, a minute 22 seconds long, and let's listen to it. And for folks here, of course, you don't speak Chinese, you can't read it, but read these subtitles.
比亚迪汉的刀片电池好，还是特斯拉的电池强？这是比亚迪汉的电池包，这是 Model 3的电池包，两个电池包的外形尺寸差不多。刀片电池包上盖是塑料的，特斯拉的电池包上盖是金属的。要是卖废铁的话，特斯拉卖的更多。刀片电池只用了螺丝固定，开掉螺丝，电池包就可以打开了。Model 3的电池壳不仅有螺丝固定，而且还有胶，拆掉螺丝还需要割开胶才能把电池包打开。所以说，特斯拉的电池密封性和防水性更好。刀片电池是一整块电池包，电池和底壳之间用胶粘起来的，技术不够，咱们用胶来凑，这胶老结实了。如果这里边有一个电池坏了，你根本拆不开，只能换整个电池包，得花10来万。特斯拉 Model 3电池包采用的是2170电池，它总共有4个模组串联而成。如果它的电池坏了，4个模组都可以单独拆下来维修更换，换一个电池模组差不多才要1万块钱。刀片电池是用这种冷却水板贴在电池表面散热，冷却液是从这个进出口进来，从出水口流出去。冷却液流过冷却水板，把电池的热量带走散热。特斯拉 Model 3的电池包是液冷的，这里是冷却液的进水口，出水口是在另外一侧。电池包里边是通过这些冷却水管把冷却液传递给我们的模组的冷却水白。这个模组的冷却水白是缠绕在每个模组两侧，所以电池的温度一致性特别好。电池包跟人一样也会发烧发热，衰减的很快。比亚迪的刀片里的冷却水板冷却，就好比我拿一瓶冰水敷在脸上降温。特斯拉电池冷却就好比我把这瓶冰水喝到肚子里边。
Oh my gosh. I like that guy a lot. I love him. He's like so enthusiastic. Jeff, so you have some experience with manufacturing. What was your reaction to this?
Yeah, so this is what companies do. They buy competitive product or third parties. They buy competitive product. They tear the two down. They look at the highest dollar components in the product and try to understand their construction, try to understand the materials, and try to assert, is there an advantage in one direction or another, or should there be a change in design or manufacturing practices? And in comparing these two, it clearly shows that there's some simplification that the BYD did with their construction. It's not clear though that what the ramifications of that are in terms of reliability and performance. So you really have to look at my takeaway is when you look at these teardowns, you have to look at everything, at face value, and then you've got to also, if you can almost literally print out a scroll of the performance, in nominal conditions, like in a factory test environment, and used in a car in nominal environments, as well as used under extremes in a reliability environment where the vehicle will be for a certain smaller percentage of time, but it will be, and all these are kind of a case of probabilities. And what you try to understand is like, what's the value per dollar of every action and every decision you make from a design and manufacturing perspective, and how is it going to impact the consumer, both from a functionality perspective, and obviously safety is job one. I think the other thing that people understand is BYD is a long time cell and pack manufacturer. They started in the consumer electronics and smartphone world, I want to say almost 20 years ago now. So they have a tremendous experience in cell and pack construction and manufacturing, and that's one of the things I think that's going to help carry them, to being at least in China. They're certainly going to be, they are a high volume elite manufacturer. So that vertical integration for BYD is really important. But again, with teardowns, there's kind of the face value, and then you kind of really have to understand the implications to performance. So interesting. And with these pack designs, you know, once you do the teardown, you try to understand, like, what can you influence in your design and manufacturing process right away? What can you do in the next generation? And it feels like they're iterating pretty quickly. And it also on its surface too, BYD and Tesla are partnering on batteries as well. So, you know, it's an interesting video to see, and this happens a lot in terms of comparative teardowns in the industry.
So a couple of dichotomies there, right, Jeff? So first of all, BYD is a battery cell manufacturer. That is what they were, what they are. And so for them to not be able to create even better batteries than what Tesla is able to do is a bit of a confusion. And then secondly, you just said it, Tesla is partnering with BYD to be a battery supplier too. So I'm sure Tesla is
Mhm.
going to teach them how to do it properly. So I think this, like you said, is this is just a kind of like continued iteration. But just I think the takeaway I have with this is Tesla's technology is just so far ahead. So okay, let's go on to the next topic, which is another big one. And so this is news from India. And typically, every time, it still is very much a kind of it's not, official sources, but everything news we've been hearing from India has turned out to be true. So I kind of believe that this is true, which is the Tesla executives are now in India talking directly with the India Investment Agency. So, two senior Tesla executives are discussing the company's plans to enter India with officials from the country's investment promotion arm. Two people with direct knowledge of matters said. Um, boom, boom. And they said this, which is the US based executives, Senior Public Policy and Business Development Executive Rohan Patel, and Vice President for Supply Chain Roshan Thomas. So, they actually named them, are currently in India, and they met officials from the Invest India agency. The CEO of Invest India held talks with during a meeting on Thursday. So it sounds like it's actually really true. Yeah. Thoughts about this, Jeff?
Yeah, Tesla's they've built themselves into a great position where the Indian government and associated investment arms are basically pulling them in. You notice we saw last week in the news, we saw them kind of pushing BYD away. BYD went in with a joint venture entry proposal into India, and the Indian government rejected that, because there's no way that they were going to allow BYD to come in wholly owned and just set up an operation and funnel parts and money back and forth between themselves back in China. And so they went in with a joint venture, and that was at least reported as being rejected. And so now you just have the two extremes, right? You have that happening with BYD, and again, there's border disputes happening between India and China. This is going to continue to play out, these geopolitical issues. And on the other side of it, you have India pulling, actually literally pulling Tesla in, because again, they want the industry leader to set up shop in their country. They want them to train, their workforce in the Tesla way and how Tesla products are, designed and manufactured, all the procurement, all the inventory, all the material management, all the just everything about the company, they'll want to emulate and learn as much as possible. Plus it's jobs, it's producing what's known as to be a great product, very high NPS scores in the world. And India wants to be a part of that. And also, um, geopolitically, India has fallen very far behind in terms of what they produce and what they export as it relates to EV. And China is continuing to accelerate that growth. So when you have all of those factors playing together, and Tesla's in a highly leveraged position right now with India. And in these negotiations, I'm sure they can extract a tremendous amount of value, because what are the other options, right? India can't turn to a General Motors or a Ford, who right now are actually shrinking abroad, and don't have that leadership in EV and don't have that expertise in EV. So Tesla's really put themselves in a highly, highly leveraged position, leveraged in a good way, meaning they have tremendous leverage. And again, I don't see them taking advantage of it. I just see them getting very fair entry into a very difficult market. India is a very difficult market to enter from a manufacturing perspective. And I see Tesla, making the moves to put themselves in a very good position again for this 2025 timed manufacturing of the higher volume Gen 3 vehicles.
Okay. It's really surely looking like it's gonna be Giga India. Giga
Yeah.
India is
And there's
happening.
a
Um,
yeah,
mhm.
just one more thing. There's a lot of talk about um the Indian market in terms of their ability to purchase EVs. And I think that's going to play out. I think India today versus India in the next couple of years, there's a fast moving
Yeah.
economy. And I would just be very careful with counting them out. And again, it's 1.6 billion people, I believe, as well. And it's hard to survey, and it's hard to really understand exactly, um, if you look at what they're buying, if you just look at what they're buying in terms of consumer electronics, there's there's certainly um, there's certainly a market. And other companies see that there's a market in India, and there's not only in auto, there's a big movement in other industries as well to move into India, manufacture, produce, and also export.
Hey there, thank you for joining me. If you can, please consider supporting this channel so I can keep it going. It's a lot of work arranging all these amazing interviews. One of the easiest ways is just to click that join button and become a member of the channel. Thank you very much. Let's get brighter. Now, it's definitely a shock though, right? I'm sorry about my voice. Again, gonna croak up. I've been drinking like crazy.
Yeah.
It's a real shock though, isn't it? I mean, nobody thought Gig India would happen. Um, but with the model compact car, there must be a belief that it's going to happen. But I think what matters most, I would say, is that the government's passion and interest and desire to make it happen. And I think that that India has shown that they want to be an exporter of electric vehicles, just like China stood up. There's a changing of the guards. We know that Europeans are faltering very badly, traditionally very, very strong. Japanese is falling badly. And so now, who's going to replace them? It's going to be American, uh, maybe even they're falling badly, as we're going to just talk about right now. And then there's the there opens it up. So it's the willingness of the government to step up. Okay,
Right.
so I'm having issues with my mouse as well. Okay, so here we go. Let's talk about Ford and GM. Now that last week they actually shared their earnings call. This was really nicely done by Omar, where he shared the kind of the comparison. So you got GM at $44 billion, Ford at 45. They're very similar revenue. Tesla's at 25. Tesla's already more than half of what they're doing. They're, they're catching up very quickly, but their income, their profit, Tesla's profit is already the same as GM's and more than Ford. So that's always been the story. The margin is so strong despite selling less cars. They're only selling a third less cars because they've just started. Once they expanded the Cybertruck, once they include the compact car, and they revised the Model 3, you can easily see that this is going to go up. And these sales, this is all cars, including ICE vehicles. And
Hmm.
so there's going to be an exponential drop in ICE vehicles, an exponential rise in EVs. And then this is a
Yeah.
fantastic analysis by CERN Basher. Oh, sorry, did you want to say something?
No, just
Yeah.
the growth, the profit per vehicle, I think is what is coming out for Tesla. Even again under this transition they did in the first half, they're still significantly more profitable per vehicle. And that's what the data is showing.
Okay, so I love this new analysis by CERN Basher. And he says, because Ford released their data, kudos to Ford for being transparent. Now let's compare where Ford is now to where Tesla was when they were in the same stage of their startup business when Tesla was still trying to start to create their first EVs, just like Ford is now. They put together a comparison of Ford Model E, that division where they're creating EVs, versus Tesla, and we're comparing March of 2023 and June of 2023 of Ford to where Tesla was in 2017 and 2018. So if you look at this, let's jump to the loss per vehicle. Right now, at this stage, Ford is losing $60,000 per vehicle, and they cut it in half. So now they're only losing 31,000 per vehicle. Well, when Tesla was at this stage, they were initially losing 24 and now they're losing 17. So they are already 50% less loss. Did I just say that right? 100% less loss. Uh, but their margins, of their loss of margins is 21% versus right now, um, Ford is at 60%. And so yeah, they're th they're making more revenue at the time, they were selling more cars. I'm sorry, they were selling the same amount of cars. At the time that they were selling the same amount of cars, that's how it's different.
Yeah.
So what's your
So
thoughts on this?
a lot. I mean, first off, these it's a optically a nice looking table, but when you kind of look behind it, there's a lot more going on. First off, Ford, um, Tesla ships directly to consumers. So when Tesla has a sale, somebody actually buys the
Right.
car and takes it home. And Ford is selling into dealerships. And so when you look at that's why it's tough to look at 1 or 2 quarters and you with that model is because they have a link in their chain that Tesla doesn't have, and that link is holding a bunch of inventory. So what we've seen with EVs at Ford and GM is we've seen them double the amount of inventory days of their ICE business because they famously didn't move on pricing until very recently with Ford. But they didn't move for so many months and kind of folded their arms and said, "We don't need to do this. We're fine." And then their inventory days doubled on their EVs. So when you look at this data, you have to understand that Ford is selling into dealerships, and then those dealerships aren't moving the cars, and that's just building up. And that's why Ford came out and said that instead of losing, I think, was it 1.5 to $3 billion, they're going to lose $4.5 billion um, in their EV business this year. So as they ship more cars, their losses are accelerating. They have an inventory. This is a real inventory problem. The things that we see going on with Tesla going from 12 to 16 days DOI, that's not a real inventory problem. This is a real inventory problem. They have upwards of 90 to 200 days of inventory on some of these EVs. And so that's why this comparison is tough to do. But the one takeaway you can have is that there's tremendously Tesla's a much more efficient company, much lower overhead, and that's the way Elon runs his companies very efficiently. And that overhead in Ford is really crushing them, and that their losses cutting in half. That's going to asymptotically reach a point. It's not like as they grow more volumes, they're going to make tons of money per vehicle. It's not going to happen that way. That's dependent on the design and the manufacturing unit economics of the vehicle. And I believe that's just going to asymptotically reach some point of maybe 10 or so $1,000 of loss. Maybe they get to break even, at some point. But even Ford themselves have said their aspirational goal in the next 2 to 3 years is or 4 years is to get to, I think, 8% um, EBIT margins, so mid single digit margins. So they actually don't have the design, they don't have the product, they don't have the design or manufacturing method to have double digit margins on their product. So there's a lot going on behind that table.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if you see the table that says wholesales versus production, and we've already reported in the past that Ford is sending it to the dealers, but the dealers have told them to stop sending it because inventory has gone up. Good point. So the confusing part about this, or the misleading part, is that you can see that the Ford has been able to reduce the loss per vehicle, and so did Tesla, right? But here's what is very interesting. Here's what happened to Tesla in the following quarter after this March 18th. At the following quarter, Tesla produced 53,000 EVs, but they lost the largest amount in a single quarter, 621 million. He says, I'm sure Elon remembers as well, because as you grow the company at this point, that's where you're just trying to scale, your losses go further. So what's going to happen to Ford? They're going to be even more losses. Imagine that. They're already losing so much money per vehicle. They're going to go more losses as they continue to scale up production until they finally tip the scale on operating efficiencies. That's if they're able to sell more cars. And the question
Well,
is, will they be able to do that?
yeah, and
Yeah.
what they said on the call is they said they're making a turn, and the turn is they were supposed to get to a 600,000 vehicle run rate by the end of 2023 on EV. That means an annualized run rate of 600,000 vehicles. And so I guess what is that? Roughly 50,000 a month. And they said they're not going to hit that. They said they're going to move that. They didn't say in the first quarter of 2024. They just moved it into 2024. So they moved that target out. Again, this is what you see with GM. This is what you see with Ford. They have these analyst conversations. They set these targets. The analysts like, okay, great. They're ramping up on EV. This is great. Come a couple quarters later, and they continue to push these targets out because Ford knows the more they ship on this current generation of vehicle, the current design, the current inefficient designs of the Mach-E and the F-150, they'll actually accelerate their losses. So they'll accelerate that loss per vehicle, and then they'd actually have to build out more capital to accelerate their losses per vehicle. So like we don't want to do that. So they want to push that out as far as possible. And what you're going to see is 2024 is going to blend into 2025 and say, well, we don't need to do this in 2024 because we have this new vehicle lineup coming in 2025. That's the playbook, mark my words. And um, and it's synonymous with what we've seen from Ford and GM uh, over the past 5 to 10 years in terms of their comments on EV.
Yeah. And then this is when Ford F-150 has no competitor. And now what happens when Cybertruck is out? Ford 150, I'm sorry, the electric version, right?
Yeah, and they have a
Okay.
competitor in Rivian. Their Rivian's outselling them, I think 2 to 1. So they have a
Jesus.
competitor, and they're being outsold by a startup. So, again, we want
Wow.
them to do well, but it's just one
Yeah.
of these things. So Ford publicly said that they're gonna focus more on hybrid, and that's the way they're going
Yeah.
to, ship more efficient vehicles in this time frame. So I think the playbook they're running is between now and their 2025 vehicle lineup, they're going to deaccelerate their losses in EV. They're going to push out their targets. They're going to try to ship more hybrids and to get more of those dollars back in from an IRA perspective and from the government and to keep them off their back. I think that's a play they're running.
Yeah. One of the commenters had actually said you should do a list of all the times that the ICE vehicle manufacturers announced something, the newspaper article of the mainstream media says it, and then it never
Be a
happens.
be a
And they
famous
seem to be
list.
playing
Yeah.
that they seem to be playing that very, very well. And the next one is another interesting thing, GM. So tell me what's going on. But so basically, I remember GM just a few weeks ago, months ago, I guess, they said that they're going to discontinue the Chevy Bolt, which is their, the high selling EV that they were making at 24,000 sales, and they're going to dump it. So the secretary, I don't know who it is. Can you tell me, Secretary
Yeah,
Jennifer? Who is it?
Jennifer Granholm, yep. Yes, Department of
Okay.
Energy.
So she said, hey, replying to this Washington Post saying that Chevy Bolt EV is returning to the market. And she said, more affordable electric vehicles staying in the market. Love to see it. Okay. That's a, nice thing. And then you said, hey, I hope Washington Post and Jennifer Whalen, was that a different Jennifer? Jean Whalen?
No,
Was that? Oh, that's the
she's
author?
the author. Yeah, she's the
Okay.
author of the article.
Yeah, he said, "I hope she ties the logic of relaunching the affordable Bolt EV to the direct quote." That's right, that you pointed this out. Where CEO Mary Barra just last month said that they don't know how to build a profitable EV this decade. So that is true. It's like, what? Just last month they said I can't build an EV until 2030 and on. And then now they're saying we're going to bring back the Chevy Bolt. You think it's going to be a hybrid? It's not,
And
right?
I put the link and then and I think it's the next image, Herbert. And I put the link to her quote as well. So it's just interesting how the government works together with big auto manufacturers. So Washington Post, again, very favorable. Says the Bolts, they're relaunching the Bolt EV. They don't realize this. So this thing went out of production to solve a catastrophe, the battery fire issue, um, and then they relaunched it into production over a year ago, and they lowered the price, and everybody was like, "Wow, how do they do?" GM must be getting really good at EV. They lowered the price into the 20,000 range for an EV. So everybody's like, "Wow, how are they doing this? Must be GM's, volume leverage and manufacturing skill." No, that was actually what's called in the industry as an end of life play, which was GM's looking at we've ordered this many parts for the Bolt, and how do we want this thing, we're not making this thing profitably. We had this issue. We've resolved this. We believe we resolved this issue with the battery fires with our manufacturing partner, and now we want to put this thing in the production. We have this much obsolescence. We have this many hundreds of millions of dollars of material to work through. So we're going to lower the price so more people buy it. Because remember, it's a tainted brand after the battery issues. So we're going to lower the price. We're going to relaunch it. We're going to do it under the guide of we're more efficient. How is GM doing it? And then literally months after they do that, they come on an analyst call, I think in the first quarter of this year, and say that they're end of lifing the Bolt at the end of this year. So everyone's surprised. What's happening? When as soon as I heard that, I'm like, this is an end of life play. They had this playbook run for the last year. They want to burn through that material, end of life, and then go on to another vehicle. And now they probably got a lot of feedback, both from the government and others saying, look, hey, you can't, we need more affordable EVs out there. You can't, take the only EV that, the most affordable to consumers off the market. And so all GM has said right now is that, okay, now we're going to relaunch it. But then at the same time they said they're going to relaunch it, Mary Barr is quoted as saying that we don't know how to produce an EV below 40,000. The Bolt was in the mid to upper 20s for MSRP. And Mary Barr says they don't know how to produce an EV below 40,000 this decade or maybe longer. She said or maybe longer profitably. So I just hope the author was like putting these 2 points together of like, well, this isn't a profitable business. We actually don't know what they're going to do. We don't know how they're going to relaunch the product. So they said that they're going to relaunch it with their Ultium, battery packs, and the belief is when they relaunch at a later date, Ultium will be ramped up, in this Ohio facility or one of their secondary facilities, and they'll have greater economies of scale, and they'll be able to relaunch the vehicle. We have no idea the price point. We have no idea if they're going to be able to do this, but I think they got a lot of negative feedback, basically, of not having any
I have a
affordable
theory,
vehicles.
Jeff.
They basically have the GM Hummer and they have the Lyric.
I have a theory, Jeff. I'm surprised you didn't come up with this theory.
Okay.
So last month, the DOE loaned Ford $9.2 billion.
Yep.
Loaned them $9.2 billion. And I don't hear the mainstream media going crazy when they loaned Tesla's like 300 million way back when that they paid fully back right away. So I think that this
Early.
was a
Yeah.
play by GM to negotiate with GM. We're going to hear very shortly that the government, DOE, is going to loan GM billions of dollars in order for them to do this. They pulled it off the market. Now they're going to bring it back because this loan is going to come in play. Yeah, it's a
Oh,
guess on my part.
just so you know, Herbert, and we can probably find this article later. The DOE did loan GM, I think, a couple of $1 billion for a battery factory a year
Yes.
ago, I think.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So the DOE, the GM and Ford are getting billions of dollars
Yeah.
in
Yep.
loans. In loans. This
Yeah.
isn't them building product and getting credits back as part of a system. They're just getting loans to build factories right
Yeah.
now. And so yeah, that Ford announcement. I mean the GM bailout I think was what $13 billion back in 2009. This is a
Yeah.
$9.2 billion loan from the Department of Energy. And by the way, it's being held up because if you look at how Ford is building out these factories, their partnerships are all foreign partnerships. It's SK coming in to build their battery, and then it's Kettle. It's not, you know, this isn't Ford engineering, Ford building a factory. It's all these joint partnerships from foreign entities coming in.
Thank you, Jeff. So, folks, you've got to follow Jeff on Twitter at the Jeff Lutz. I'm ordering you. If you're a, a frequent viewer of this channel, please follow him on Twitter. And I don't know if people are aware and if they're appreciative of the fact that Jeff is a high level executive, a chief level executive, C-level executive for Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies. He has a consulting firm, and we get him basically an hour a week sharing information that is worth big bucks. Okay. So follow him. Thank you, Jeff. Super appreciate your comments all the time.
Mhm.
We got a few more things to move forward to. So, so we're comparing Ford, GM, and Tesla, and they all reported their Q2 2023. James Stevenson's another person that people are here absolutely following because he has deep, well designed, very, very detailed forecasts and spreadsheets following every car manufacturer. So he says that he has a video that has 8 charts in his video. I only pulled one, which is comparing Ford, GM, and Tesla. This is from 2016 to the current trailing 12 months of the second quarter of 2023. And if you look at their global deliveries, here's what happened, right? So Ford was doing very well in 2016-17. So was GM. But because of COVID, which happened in 2019, things fell off in terms of their ability to deliver. Supply chain shock, as Jeff has been very nicely telling us about. And now they're probably back up when supply chain is back fully ramped up. And here's what's happened to Tesla in the meantime. But you had some great comments about this table. What is it, Jeff?
Yeah. Just a couple things. So we just heard Ford earnings last week, you just heard GM earnings the week before. And what did they do? They comp to the prior year. And the prior year, they were still tripping over themselves due to quote unquote supply issues. And then the year before that, they were tripping over themselves for quote unquote supply issues. And then there was the demand shock. And what I believe happened in 2020 with COVID is that these companies basically said their planning groups got together and said, "Look, we think there's going to be a huge demand drop off with COVID. People are going to be driving less," and I believe, they went out and spooked their supply base and took their numbers down. And when that happens, these suppliers have to take quick action to lay people off, reduce capital, and to deal with their numbers coming down. And when you slow down these very, very old fabs that Ford and GM were using, they're using 30, 35 nanometer fabs and greater for some of their silicon. Restarting those and getting the kind of output you need out of them is going to be very difficult because they're highly inefficient fabs. Those suppliers that run those fabs also run fabs that are at 14 nanometer and 10 nanometer, and they'll get more output and more revenue by running those fabs and running these 30 plus for these um, old autos. So if you look at those charts, what I try to remind people is that you can't comp to the prior year. You got to go pre-COVID. And if you look at pre-COVID, they're shipping significantly less vehicles to 2019 comparison to the trailing 20-month view annualized of this past quarter. And what this shows is that they're actually shrinking. And if you look at Tesla's growth, notice there's no COVID excuse in the 2020, 2021, 2022. It's just
Yeah.
nice growth. And this for me is part of one of the I always look for dislocations when it comes to
Mm.
like investing and so forth. And this isn't investment advice. But to me, this is not only Tesla's performance, but this is the magnet that is EV adoption as a percent of total auto. And this, I believe, will continue. It may not continue at the same rate, but it's going to continue and it's going to grow. And whatever slowdowns you're going to hear of, maybe in macro auto coming because of all these credit issues and all the rate issues, whatever you're going to see, you got to look at that the percent weighting of those issues versus the percent growth in EV as a percent of total auto. Because as EV as a percent of total auto grows, Tesla has the supply and they have the product that people want. So they have that combination. They have the Model Y you can buy for $47,000. GM's Model Y equivalent is called the Cadillac Lyriq, and it's $65,000. Polestar's equivalent is almost $80,000. So these companies can't produce at the same unit economics of Tesla. So as that EV adoption curve grows, people are going to buy Teslas, and Tesla has supply. So that flywheel, I believe, will continue to turn. But just the key takeaway there is Tesla grew very smoothly through COVID, very smoothly through all those disruptions. And if you really want to comp Ford and GM and these other ones, you got to look at them to 2019 versus 2019.
Yeah. Exactly. And then just all we need to see here is that regardless, forget the COVID bit, we're back to full supply, and the deliveries are falling for Ford, deliveries are falling for GM, deliveries going up for Tesla. So this transition to EVs is a big deal. All right,
Yeah.
we've got so much to cover still. So this is a new news that came out that Biden administration proposed strict new fuel economy standards. This is for ICE vehicles that now they've increased the standards to 58 miles per gallon for cars and light duty trucks by 2032. So they're trying to slash emissions from the transportation sector. So not only are they incenting the EV market, but for the regular gas cars, they want to create standards to increase the miles per gallon. GM, of course, very, very upset about this. They warned the government that this is going to cost the auto industry up to $300 billion in total penalties, $4,300 per vehicle. But the Biden administration said that they don't think that that's correct. But of course, GM's going to say this. So they basically said this. Executive David Strickland met on July 17th with the White House Office of Management and Budget officials. And then they did $100 to $300 billion of penalties. The NHTSA government, which oversees the corporate average fuel economy, said that the GM's estimate is pure speculation and inaccurate. They don't think it's true. They're going to release their CAFE requirements for 2027 beyond on Friday. So we should see that. It is already past Friday. So hopefully we might have missed it. Or they're going to
We'll
sign
see
off
it.
on
Yeah.
Tuesday. Yeah, we're going to sign off on Tuesday. So by tomorrow, we should see this. And then, so that, the Biden administration said maybe in one scenario, the auto industry could face about $3 billion in economy penalties, and another might face no penalties. So that's what they were saying. But of course, the benefits to the consumers is that it's going to be $50 billion in fuel savings over a vehicle's lifetime. and reduce the oil. So, everything's just going EV way, which is fantastic to hear. What's your thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm not a I'm more of a fan of kind of letting the kind of the free economy work, but what the White House is doing is pretty smart. If you're pro EV and you're pro clean energy, which a lot of us are, it's pretty smart. Basically, they're saying, look, it's a balloon, and like, look, we're going to give you credits. The more EVs you ship, we're going to give you credit if you assemble batteries, cells and batteries in the United States, and you do more of this vehicle manufacturing in the United States, we're going to have money coming back to you, manufacturer. But if what you the more if the percentage of what you produce, this is why it's a fleet wide average, the 58 miles. So if they produce more EVs and hybrids, their miles per gallon, they'll actually it'll go up the more they produce of those types of vehicles. So on the other hand, what they're doing with these cafe requirements is they're saying, look, we're going to give you credits for building, but if you don't build enough of them, which is what we're seeing right now with GM and Ford, right? It's basically they're kind of pacifying the marketplace or even pacifying governments. Remember, Mary, you led in EVs, but they're only producing a few thousand EVs per quarter. The government's like they're onto this. They're saying, look, like we need a higher percentage of what you produce. You need to get on this. You need to get moving. So the government's actually squeezing them from both ends. At one end, they have the carrot out there with the IRA, both for consumers and for manufacturers. And on the other end, they're pushing them on these cafe standards. And GM's coming back and saying, basically, GM's looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, look, we're not going to produce as many clean energy vehicles by then. And they're basically saying this is what it's going to cost us in penalties if you put these penalties on us. So billions of dollars will come in via IRA credits, and then billions of dollars will go out due to them not meeting these standards. So it's a very interesting thing where the government actually has this forcing function to get these U.S. companies to produce more clean energy vehicles. It's fascinating to
Yeah.
watch because publicly GM's like we're all in on EV. There's going to be 35 models. We're doing this, but it's the government's basically saying, all right, great, we're going to raise the cafe standards and you should be fine with it, but they're not.
Yeah, but of course, we should not forget that there's tremendous government incentives being applied to the gas cars, gas in general, oil and gas. It's actually 10 to
Correct.
1. The incentives that they give to the oil and gas industry versus the electric vehicle or electric industry is 10 to 1. So whenever we hear this stuff, people go, oh, that's unfair. Remember how much money they're actually been continuing to throw for decades. Okay, so here's some very good news about what's happening in the economy. So when you look at the S&P 500 companies, half of them have already reported, and as they've reported, 80% of the S&P 500 who's reported have beat their profit expectations. They're making money. Every company seems to be making money. 80% are. So the second quarter profits, of course, are down about 8% from a year ago, but 80% are now profitable, and 44% of have reported as of Thursday. So, what? I thought it was he said 50%. So 44%. Sorry,
Reported.
yeah,
Have reported.
have reported
Yeah.
as of
Yeah.
Thursday. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
thought he said 50%. So with nearly
He
half.
said
Come on,
yeah.
44%. He said, okay, sorry guys, 44%, not half, but still
Yeah,
good news, right, Jeff?
yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mixed story because a lot of these companies adjusted their earnings lower. From the prior year, they adjusted their earnings targets lower. So now they're beating the lower targets. But the projection was to actually only be about 7% lower than prior earnings. And now it looks like they're between 8 and 9. Now, Apple and Amazon, there's a big slew of earnings coming this week, and they could change that in either direction. Um, but I would say there was surprise in the first half of the year, and there's continued surprise at the ability for these companies to beat. But just everyone needs to keep in mind that they lowered their expectations from the prior year. So that's why you need to look at their earnings as a multiple of the S&P to understand, what that intrinsic value in. But if they continue to beat, I think this will definitely help, the rally continue to persist for some period of time. Again, not
Exactly.
investment
So it's
advice.
looking very good. The boom is happening, AI boom helping it, but earnings are continuing to grow. The economy's turning around. What happens when the economy turns around, Jeff? Auto industry, Tesla.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing about Tesla, of course, as we compare to competitors, is the incredible community. And so what happened this weekend was the Tesla owners Silicon Valley Club, which has, I don't know, 700,000 followers, um, run by um, John at Tesla owner Silicon Valley and Kelvin G. Um,
Yep.
they hosted this, and it was an amazing, amazing event that happened. I think there was 1,500 attendees, tremendous 2,000 cars or whatever arrived, and they hosted um, May Musk. So let me play a few videos to show you what actually happened. So yeah, so this is just a beautiful video. Of course, there's no music yet. That the official videos will come out, but shows you this was a very large event and it was so incredibly well run. Kudos to John and Kelvin for doing a fantastic job. And they're hosting this
100%.
once a year, and it's just amazing. I had in Tesla Northwest. This is Northwest, which is Seattle and Oregon and everywhere. We had probably 15 plus people drive down from Seattle. I personally was supposed to go there, but then my schedule wasn't allowed me to do that. And so let's watch that video with
It's the day number 2, and guess who we ran into?
Hello there.
The fabulous May Musk. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for inviting me.
We really appreciate it.
Yes, we're going to have fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. She's going to be talking in a couple of minutes about A Woman Makes a Plan. So we couldn't be more excited to host her and have her at the largest Tesla event in North America.
largest Tesla event in North America. And so one of the panels that happened that I actually was supposed to be here, Jeff. This was my title. It was supposed to be me and Farzad, but because I couldn't make it, uh, it was wonderfully hosted now, not only by Farzad, but our friends, Alexandra Mertz, Brian White, and Amy. As you guys all know, they're all regulars on my channel here, but I'm the one who came up with this title, The Future of Tesla 3, 5, and 10 years from now. And it was a massive, massive hit panel. Here's what happened at the panel. I mean, you could argue that maybe if I was the one doing it, it wouldn't be it wouldn't have been that excited. But Alexandra
That
and
was great.
Amy and Brian White are just amazing. And of course, Farzad is just brilliant. So this was a fun event. Thank you so much, Jeff. You are a wealth of information and knowledge, and I appreciate this. And folks, please follow him on Twitter at the Jeff Lutz. So thank you very much. Thank you, Jeff. See everybody.
Thank you, Herbert. Take care.